His hand trembled not from cold but a relentless darkness within. Each painting was a silent offering, left anonymously in forgotten corners, a desperate hope for warmth after he was gone. But what happens when a hidden talent meant for the shadows is finally brought into the light, revealing a profound legacy that will inspire a city? The final brushstroke was a betrayal. Sage's hand, which had once moved with the fluid certainty of a river, now carried a slight, insistent tremor. It was a tremor born not of excitement or fatigue, but of a relentless, blooming darkness deep within his brain. He steadied his wrist with his other hand, guiding the fine-tipped brush to place a final fleck of light in the eye of the old man on the canvas. There, not perfect, but finished. The man in the painting sat on a bus-stop bench, his shoulders slumped under the weight of a threadbare coat and a lifetime of unseen burdens. Yet in his gaze, Sage had fought to capture a stubborn glint of dignity, a quiet refusal to be erased by the city's indifference. It was a look Sage knew well. He worked with practiced efficiency in the dim light of his top-floor Philly apartment, the air thick with the scent of turpentine and drying oils. He carefully wrapped the small canvas in brown paper, a shield against the world's casual disregard. He didn't sign the front. He never did. Instead, he flipped it over and with a piece of charcoal drew his only signature, a tiny, stylized sparrow, its wings spread wide for flight. Later, long after midnight, he pulled the hood of his sweatshirt over his head, the wrapped canvas tucked securely under his arm. The city was a hushed beast, its breath a cold November wind that snaked through the empty streets. He walked the 12 blocks to St. Jude's outreach shelter, his steps deliberate and quiet. He didn't go inside. He simply propped the painting against the wall next to the overnight donation bin, a silent offering. For 11 months, this had been his ritual, a quiet rebellion against the silence that was coming for him, a desperate hope that a piece of his soul, a splash of color, might bring a flicker of warmth to this cold, forgotten corner long after he was gone. Landon, at 41, had orchestrated his life's great retreat. He had fled the world of champagne flutes and hushed, critical whispers, a world where art was measured in auction prices and social currency. As a curator for a prestigious downtown gallery, he'd once spent his days convincing millionaires that a canvas splattered with beige was a profound statement on existential ennui. The final straw had been a lavish gala for an artist who'd built a sculpture from shredded financial documents, a piece lauded as a searing critique of capitalism, while being sold for a price that could have funded St. Jude's for a year. The hypocrisy had finally choked him. Now his world was the scent of industrial bleach, the clatter of metal trays, and the quiet, bone-deep weariness in the eyes of the people he served. Here at least the desperation was honest. It was a Tuesday morning, the air sharp with the promise of a cold snap when he found it. While sorting through the overnight donations, a predictable jumble of moth-eaten sweaters, a single child sneaker, and a sadly broken toaster, his eyes caught on a rectangular package wrapped in plain brown paper. It was propped with intention against the brick wall, separate from the tossed-in chaos of the bin. He felt a familiar flicker of anticipation. He carried it back to his office, a converted supply closet that was his only private space, and unwrapped it with a reverence he hadn't felt in years. The painting of the old man at the bus stop stared back at him, and the air left his lungs in a quiet rush. It was him, the same hand, the same soul. He recognized the signature style immediately, an impasto so thick with paint it was almost sculptural, yet it captured the most fragile of human emotions. There was a command of light that felt stolen from the Dutch masters, but it was used to illuminate a face that society had worked hard to keep in the shadows. He could almost feel the grit of the sidewalk, the chill in the man's bones. With trembling hands, he carried the canvas to the far wall of his closet office, where he knelt. He leaned the new piece against the plaster, adding it to a secret, sacred collection. There were 11 others, rescued from the donation bin over the past year. A woman with cracked, calloused hands mending a child's sock, her face a study in fierce, tender concentration. A young man staring at his fractured reflection in a dirty puddle, his expression a storm of conflict and nascent hope. A view from a tenement rooftop, the city lights sprawling below like a galaxy of broken promises. All unsigned, all bearing the same tiny, charcoal sparrow on the back. Landon stayed there on his knees for a long time, the single bare bulb overhead casting a glow on the assembled works. This wasn't a hobby. This was a silent sermon, a powerful, singular, and achingly compassionate artistic voice crying out from the wilderness of the city. It was a sustained act of devotion, a story being told in secret installments, a testament to the beauty and pain of the unseen. He wasn't just a janitor of forgotten things anymore. He was the keeper of a treasure. He was the sole audience for an artist he'd named, in the privacy of his own mind, the Sparrow, a fitting title for a genius who left gifts of such delicate, soaring humanity before vanishing back into the urban gray. The curator in Landon, long dormant, roared back to life. This was more than a collection of beautiful objects. It was a profound human statement, and it was being whispered into a void. The thought of this talent burning itself out in anonymity felt like a sacrilege. The Sparrow deserved to be heard. He began his search with the people of St. Jude's. He showed photos of the paintings on his phone to the residents, the cooks, the overnight staff. Most just shook their heads, their minds occupied by more immediate concerns. But Maria, a cleaner with kind eyes and an encyclopedic memory for the shelter's nocturnal rhythms, offered a flicker of a lead. "A man, yes," she said, her brow furrowed in thought. "Tall, thin, always a dark hoodie pulled low. I see him sometimes very late when I take the trash out. He never comes in, just leaves something and walks away. I thought maybe he was a former resident, too ashamed to show his face." She gestured vaguely east. "He always comes from that direction." It was a ghost of a clue, but it was a start. Landon's focus shifted to the canvases themselves. They were not cheap, pre-stretched frames from a big box store. The canvas was a specific linen blend, the stretchers hand-joined. This was the work of someone who respected their materials. He photographed the distinctive weave of the fabric and the small logo on a discarded paint tube he'd found near one of the early paintings. His investigation led him to a small, cluttered art supply shop 3 neighborhoods over, a dusty haven called Berman's Brushes and Pigments. The air inside smelled of linseed oil and old paper. The owner, a man named Al Berman with spectacles perched on the end of his nose, peered at the photo on Landon's phone. He ran a thumb over the image of the canvas weave. "Ah, the Belgian linen. Not many people spring for that these days," he rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Too expensive, but one kid, yes, one kid buys it. And these paints too, Old Holland. The best," he looked up at Landon, "comes in every few weeks. A young black man, quiet, pays in cash." Al Berman squinted, his memory sifting through years of customer interactions. "Say, I think his name is Sage," he said, tapping a finger on the counter. "Nice kid, always polite, but lately he looks tired, real tired, like he's carrying something heavy." He described the general direction Sage always headed after leaving the shop, a maze of residential streets and aging brick walk-ups. For 3 days, Landon walked those streets. It was a search fueled by a conviction that felt almost irrational. He felt like a detective hunting a phantom, his only evidence a handful of masterpieces and the echo of a name. He peered at mailboxes, scanned windows, and felt the gnawing doubt that he was on a fool's errand. On the 3rd afternoon, his hope wearing thin, he saw it. Tucked beside a row of overflowing garbage cans in front of a rundown 5-story apartment building was a cardboard box. Inside, amidst coffee grounds and junk mail, was a crumpled, empty tube of Old Holland paint, its cerulean blue label smeared with the exact hue from the sky in the rooftop painting. His heart hammered against his ribs. He stood on the cracked pavement staring up at the building. This was it. He found the tenant list in the vestibule, a collection of faded, handwritten names. There, next to 5 billion, was a single, neatly printed word: S. Calloway. He climbed the 5 flights of stairs, each step echoing in the unnervingly quiet building. The air grew thinner, colder. He stood before the door of 5 billion, a simple, battered wooden door like any other. He could hear the faint sound of classical music from within. He raised his hand, his knuckles hovering for a moment, and then knocked. The music stopped. A long silence, then the sound of a chain rattling. The door opened a few inches, and a face appeared in the sliver of space. It was a young man, his skin ashen, his large, intelligent eyes hollowed out with a weariness that went far beyond his years. He was thin, just as Maria had described, swallowed by a gray sweatshirt. It was Sage. "Can I help you?" Sage's voice was raspy, guarded. Landon's carefully rehearsed words evaporated. He was face to face with the sparrow. "My name is Landon," he began, his own voice unsteady. "I'm a volunteer at St. Jude's. I'm here because of your paintings." Sage's eyes, already wary, narrowed into slits of pure alarm. His immediate instinct was to slam the door, to retreat back into the anonymity he had so carefully constructed. "Wait," Landon pleaded, placing a hand gently on the door. "Please. I'm not here to expose you, I'm here to thank you. Your work, it speaks. It gives dignity to people who have none. I'm not here to bother you. I just had to tell you your paintings, they have a soul." He held his breath, the words hanging in the stale air of the hallway, a humble offering laid at the feet of a startled genius. The chain remained on the door, a thin metal line of defense. Sage stared at Landon, his mind racing. For a year he had operated in the shadows, his art a final, silent conversation with a world he was preparing to leave. This man's presence was a violation. A bright, unwelcome light shone into his carefully guarded twilight. He started to push the door closed. "The woman with the mending," Landon said quickly, his voice earnest, desperate not to lose this connection. "The way you painted her hands, you saw her. You didn't just look, you saw asterisk her. You saw her strength, not just her poverty. That painting hangs in the common room now. People stop and look at it, they see themselves in it, they feel seen." Sage's hand froze on the door. He had painted that piece after watching an elderly woman at a laundromat, her fingers gnarled with arthritis, painstakingly stitching a tear in a small, faded t-shirt. He had been moved by her quiet, unheralded act of love. Slowly, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his entire illness, Sage slid the chain free. The door swung open, revealing a small, sparse apartment that was more studio than home. Canvases were everywhere, stacked against walls, leaning on chairs, a universe of captured moments. The air was heavy with the smell of his work, but also with the sterile, chemical scent of medicine. On a small table beside a plate with a half-eaten piece of toast were several orange prescription bottles, their labels stark and clinical. Landon's gaze fell upon them, and a wave of understanding washed over him, so profound it was painful. This wasn't just an artist choosing anonymity. This was a man racing against time. The tremor in his hands, the exhaustion in his eyes, it all clicked into place. He stepped inside, his art world pretense stripped away, leaving only a raw human respect. "You're him," Landon whispered, his eyes scanning the stunning, heartbreaking collection of work. "You're the sparrow." Sage gave a weak, humorless smile. "I'm just a guy who paints." Landon shook his head, his throat tight with emotion. He didn't ask about the pills. He didn't offer pity. He offered the only thing he knew, the only thing that mattered in this room. "No, you're a world-class artist, and the world needs to see this." He gestured around the room, not for money, not for fame, for this. He tapped his own chest. "For the feeling, Sage, let me give you a show. One night. One exhibition. We'll call it what it is, a tribute. All proceeds, every single cent, will go to rebuilding the West Wing of St. Jude's, to give them a proper infirmary, a place of warmth." Sage flinched, turning away. "No, I don't do shows. I don't want the attention." The thought of standing in a crowd, of being looked at, judged, pitied, it was terrifying. "This isn't about attention," Landon pressed, his voice soft but firm. "This is about legacy. You are pouring your life onto these canvases. Don't let it end in a dusty room. Let it live." Let it breathe. Let your art do the work you started, but on a scale you can't imagine. Let your sparrow fly. The words hung in the air, a powerful, terrifying invitation. Sage looked from his paintings to the pill bottles, from the window overlooking the indifferent city to the face of this stranger who saw him more clearly than anyone had in years. The fight he had been waging in secret was suddenly offered a new, magnificent battlefield. After a long, silent battle within himself, Sage gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The exhibition, held 2 months later in a donated community center space, was titled The Sparrow's Song, The Art of Sage Calloway. On opening night, the room was electric. It was a strange, beautiful mix of people. Sharp-suited art critics Landon had called in favors from, old friends from his gallery days, and most importantly, dozens of residents and staff from St. Jude's who stood before the paintings with tears in their eyes. Sage, leaning on a cane but standing tall, stood in the center of it all. For the first time, he wasn't looking at his art in solitude. He was seeing it reflected in the eyes of others. He saw understanding. He saw awe. He saw gratitude. When Landon took the small stage to introduce him, the room erupted in applause, a sustained, roaring wave of it. It wasn't pity. It was pure, unadulterated recognition. And in that moment, bathed in the warmth of that sound, Sage felt a sense of peace, a feeling of profound and perfect completion that no medicine could ever hope to provide. The exhibition was more than a success. It was a phenomenon. The story of the anonymous sparrow captured the city's heart. Local news channels ran features, and the community responded with an outpouring of generosity that stunned everyone, especially Landon. The funds raised far exceeded their most optimistic projections, providing enough to not only renovate the west wing of St. Jude's, but to fully equip it as a modern, compassionate care space. Sage did not live to see the construction completed. The show had taken a significant toll on his dwindling reserves of strength, but he faced his final weeks with a newfound serenity. He had been seen. His song had been heard. He passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 months after the opening night, his apartment quiet, a faint smell of turpentine still lingering in the air. He left no will, but he didn't need to. His legacy was already in motion. Landon became the unwavering steward of that legacy. He oversaw every detail of the shelter's new wing, ensuring the space was filled with light and warmth, a stark contrast to the grim functionality of the old infirmary. He worked with the contractors to design a bright, airy room at the heart of the new wing. It had a large window facing the morning sun and clean, white walls perfect for displaying art. It was to be a place for creative therapy, for quiet contemplation, for healing. He personally hung 3 of Sage's most beloved paintings on the walls: the woman with the mending, the young man at the puddle, and the rooftop view of the city. Beneath them he installed a small, simple brass plaque. It didn't mention his illness or the details of his death. It just said, "The Sage Calloway Studio," in honor of an artist who saw the beauty in all of us. His light remains. A year later, the St. Jude's Outreach Shelter was transformed. The new wing hummed with a quiet, hopeful energy. In the heart of it, the Sage Calloway Studio was bathed in the soft light of a late afternoon. The smell of paint, no longer a solitary secret in a top-floor apartment, was now a scent of possibility. A young girl, no older than 15, sat on a stool, a sketchbook open on her lap. She'd arrived at the shelter a month ago, silent and withdrawn, carrying her world in a battered backpack. A counselor had gently guided her into the studio, showing her the canvases, the brushes, the vibrant tubes of paint left there for anyone to use. Today she was drawing. Her hand, hesitant at first, was now moving with a budding confidence. She was sketching the face of Maria, the cleaner, who was patiently posing for her by the window. The girl wasn't just copying her features. She was trying to capture the kindness in her eyes, the same way Sage had captured the dignity in the old man at the bus stop. When she finished the sketch, she paused, looked up at the paintings on the wall, then back at her own work. With a soft pencil, she drew a tiny, almost imperceptible figure in the bottom corner of her page. It wasn't perfect, but it was unmistakable. A small sparrow, just learning how to spread its wings.